12,000 years ago, the world was almost unrecognizable. There were no nations. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors survived in worlds shaped by seasons, animals, rivers, and ice. They were not primitive minds waiting for civilization to arrive. They understood animals, plants, weather, and terrain with expertise. For thousands of years, this world endured. And then, something changed. Across generations, people began staying longer in favored places. They stored food, built more substantial homes, gathered in larger. But beneath one hill, in what is now southeastern Turkey, these stones were already ancient, thousands of years before Stonehenge was built. They stood more than 7,000 acres. They had no engines, no steel cranes, no modern machinery, yet they quarried enormous blocks of limestone. Monuments require more than stone. They require food, knowledge, cooperation, and purpose. For generations, the story seemed simple. Farming came first, then villages. To understand what happened 12,000 years ago, we must travel even farther back, to a world locked in ice. Vast ice sheets covered northern regions. But this was not simply a frozen planet. Beyond the glaciers stretched things.
So much water was trapped in ice that global sea levels were more than 100 meters lower than today.
Britain was not yet an island. Across areas now covered by the North Sea stretched landscapes of rivers, wetlands, and plains. Humans shared this world with animals that now seem almost mythical. Mammoths crossed the oceans. Survival required extraordinary knowledge. A footprint could reveal an animal's direction. Broken vegetation. Their greatest technology was not simply stone, it was knowledge. How to make fire, how to shape tools, how to preserve food. They also created images. Deep inside caves, animals emerged. These communities were not necessarily isolated. Materials traveled across remarkable distances. People migrated. But the frozen world would not last. Temperatures shifted. Glaciers retreated. As the great ice sheets retreated, landscapes transformed. New rivers formed. Vegetation just. Then, around 12,900 years ago, climatic conditions shifted again. The Younger Dryas lasted for more than 1,000 years. Its effects were not identical everywhere. Humans responded as they always had, by adapting. They changed where they traveled, what they hunted, and what they gathered. In Southwest Asia lay a region of extraordinary ecological diversity. Wild wheat and boas. Long before fully domesticated crops dominated the landscape, people already knew these plants intimately. Storage changed the meaning of food. A resource gathered today could support people tomorrow. In favorable places, some communities began staying longer. Camps became more substantial. Hearths were used again. Remaining in one place changed more than shelter. People returned to the same hearths. But while some communities were experimenting with longer settlement and increasingly intensive use of wild plants, something else was happening. More than 11,000 years ago, hands began cutting into this limestone. The pillars were not found ready-made. They had to be extracted from the limestone plateau itself. Stone tools. Moving a pillar like this required more than strength. It required coordination. People had to work together, respond to one another, and maintain a shared goal. And then came the most dangerous moment. The stone had to stand. Whatever method they used, failure. When the work was finished, the result was unlike an ordinary shelter. Great pillars surrounded an enclosed space.
The T-shaped pillars may not simply represent abstract stones.
Across the pillars appear animals. Snakes, foxes, wild boar, birds. Perhaps people came here from surrounding communities. Perhaps they shared food, exchanged materials, renewed relationships. Stone alone cannot build a monument. Workers must eat, water must be carried, tools must be maintained. Time spent building is time not spent gathering food elsewhere.
Which came first? The settled world, or the need to gather?
Across these hills, communities moved through landscapes they knew intimately. Water sources, hunting grounds, traditions. Then came discoveries at places such as Karahan Tepe. Here too, archaeologists uncovered monumental Animals dominate many surviving carvings. But human forms appear as well. The similarities do not prove that every site served the same purpose, but they reveal something important. This was not an empire. There is no evidence here for kings, armies, or a forgotten urban state. Gathering itself may have been powerful. People who spent much of their lives in smaller communities could meet others here. A person can carry only so much across a landscape. But an idea weighs nothing. A technique can be taught, a story remembered. This was not civilization as later generations would know it. There were no written laws, no known kings, no great cities. We call it the agricultural revolution. But there was no single day when humans invented farming. No Britain. For thousands of years, people had gathered wild plants. They knew where cereals grew, when they ripened, and At first, many changes may have been almost invisible. Seeds were carried, some were dropped. Eventually, the plants themselves began to change. Wild cereals naturally release their seeds, but domestication was never a one-way process. Humans changed plants, and plants changed human lives. Eventually, gathering became something more deliberate. People began investing labor in particular patches of land. Animals followed their own paths into the human world. Sheep, goats, and other species were not domesticated in a single moment. Stored food offered security, but it also created something mobile hunter-gatherers possessed in different forms: accumulated resources. The more labor people invested in land, the more valuable remainder that land became. The agricultural revolution was not a moment. It was a relationship that deepened across thousands of years. For most of human existence, home could move. A shelter might last a season, a campsite perhaps longer. At Jericho, beside a dependable spring in the Jordan Valley, a substantial community emerged. By the 9th millennium, the tower rose several meters above the settlement. Building it demanded planning and enormous effort. Again, architecture reveals something larger than architecture. Someone had to gather material, someone had to provide food, people had to coordinate their labor. Thousands of years later, another remarkable settlement flourished in central Anatolia. There were few streets in the conventional sense, houses pressed against one another. Movement often took place across.
The house was more than shelter. It was a place of work, food, memory, and repeated renewal.
At Çatalhöyük, some of the dead were buried beneath the floors and platforms of houses. When generations invest labor in the same place, land begins to carry memory. A field represents past work and future food. The question was no longer simply how humans would build this new world, but what that world would do to them.
The first permanent settlements offered security, community, and opportunity. But bringing large numbers of humans.
Density changes the ecology of disease. Pathogens spread more easily when people live close together. Domestication brought animals into increasingly close contact with humans. Farming could produce remarkable quantities of food. But food did not appear by itself. Agriculture could create abundance. It could also concentrate risk. When communities depended heavily on a sprint, stored food could protect a community from uncertainty. But resources can also become influence. Walls also began to shape some settlements. Their purposes varied, and not every wall was built. Permanent communities could cooperate. They could trade. They could intermarry. But land, water, and stinties. Was this progress? The answer depends on what we choose to measure. More food could support more people. Settlements preserved knowledge. And eventually, villages began becoming something else. Cities. Thousands of years after the first monumental stones were raised, human communities crossed another threshold. Villages had grown. Among the most important was Uruk. By the 4th millennium BCE, it had grown into an extraordinary urban center. Large settlements changed the meaning of work. Not everyone needed to spend every day producing food. Some became skilled potters. Cities also depended on worlds far beyond their walls. Southern Mesopotamia lacked many important raw materials. As cities grew, institutions became increasingly important. Food had to be stored. For most of human history, information lived inside human minds. But a city produces more information than any one person can remember. How much grain entered storage? Before writing recorded stories, it helped record things, quantities, goods, transactions.
Then, a mark was pressed into clay. Another followed. The marks represented information.
By 2100, the biggest transformation may not be the smartphone itself, but the invisible intelligence surrounding humanity. With writing, names could survive their owners. Accounts could outlive the people who made them. Eventually, law. So what really happened 12,000 years ago? After everything buried beneath the soil has revealed, humanity did not wake one morning and choose civilization. Different communities followed different paths. Some remained mobile.
The climate changed. Ice retreated. Rainfall patterns shifted.
People gathered, perhaps to exchange food, perhaps to renew relationships, perhaps to share stories, beliefs, or ceremonies whose meanings are now lost.
People built, not with machines, not with forgotten technologies, but with knowledge, planning, cooperation.
People changed nature. Plants that had evolved without us began evolving alongside us. Animals entered human communities, but nature changed us in return. Farming altered work, settlement altered disease, storage altered wealth, population altered society. Bullets. Across thousands of years, camps became settlements. Some settlements became villages. Some villages became cities. The people who lived here were not primitive versions of us. They were us. They loved, feared, learned, remembered.
Civilizations like to imagine that they are permanent, yet cities fall.